If you use the Hava app and you haven't thought consciously about satiety, you will inevitably learn something important and valuable.
Chris Cornell lost 80 pounds and has kept it off effortlessly for many years.
Once I lost 80 pounds, my whole outlook changed. I felt great about myself. I'm now 60 years old. I started running. I'm stronger than I ever was. I feel like I can do anything now.
He did it by following 5 simple rules that helped him achieve satiety. Welcome to the Hava Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Andreas Eenfeldt. Welcome, Chris. Nice to have you on the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me here. My pleasure.
For people who don't know you, you had quite an impressive health journey. Could you tell a little bit about everything that's happened to you in the past few years?
Well, I guess most people know me for losing a lot of weight. Back in 2018, I switched over to a low-carb diet and had a major transformation in my life, lost a lot of weight. That all started one day when I stepped on a scale at my mother's house. I hadn't been on a scale in probably years, and I had no idea how much I weighed. I figured maybe 260 or something like that, and the numbers on the scale said 278. And I almost couldn't believe it, but when I looked in the mirror, I realized that I'd been kidding myself for a while. And I wasn't feeling great. I had been lacking energy. I was really out of shape, partly because the more overweight I got, the less I was willing or interested to do or able to do exercise. So it was like a vicious circle, and I was really out of shape. And I did have some medical issues. There was a lot of things that were suboptimal, to say the least. And so I reached out in very early 2018 to a doctor friend of mine and asked him for a book to recommend that I could use to lose weight, because I had this feeling that there had to be something, even though I had tried everything that I could think of to lose weight sustainably. And I should talk about that briefly. Like the efforts to lose weight for me were an ongoing thing in cycles. And I think this is something that most people can relate to. I knew I was overweight. I knew I had poor body composition, and I knew that I was out of shape. So I would go on little binges where I would restrict calories, and I would actually lose weight. And on various occasions, I lost 20, 30. One time I lost 50, 55 pounds through pure white knuckle willpower, calorie restriction. But the whole experience was miserable. And I talk a lot now to people that are on the same basic journey, and I learned that a lot of the experiences that I had are just the same experiences that so many other people have and are still having today. So there's a lot of different directions I could go with this, but the bottom line was back in 2018, the doctor friend of mine recommended the book, Why We Get Fat by Gary Taubes. I read it.
Yeah, so like a low carb book.
It made sense. It solved some very specific problems for me. Some of the problems, that it solved weren't particular things that I even took from the book, but when I switched my diet, certain things started happening. And one of the first things that I noticed, I think lines up with the subject that we're going to talk about today, and that's satiety. I noticed in the first 2 weeks of getting rid of added sugar, processed carbs. I also, around that same time, eliminated seed oils. But for me, having been like a sugar addict for all these years, getting rid of the sugar and the processed carbs and replacing those foods with more, what turns out to be more satiating foods, high protein foods, my whole outlook on dieting changed because the effort disappeared. It went from willpower to, there's some discipline required, but it's just common sense discipline that I now have to exercise rather than living a life of being deprived and sacrifice and restriction.
So could you talk more about what's the difference? Because I'm not sure that everybody listening intuitively understands sort of what's the difference. You said, you needed to white knuckle it before when you try to reduce calories, But now when you switch what you eat, suddenly it's more of a discipline thing. And when you eat what you plan to eat, then there's really no struggle, if I understand you correctly. But maybe you can describe a little bit more what's the difference there.
Well, I learned that certain foods provide for me satiety, which to me is a feeling of the absence of desire for food, feeling that I have enough. My body isn't crying out for more food. There's no cravings. And that is a wonderful place to be. And I've learned that, certain foods move me closer to that, and other foods actually appear to push me further from that. Foods like, for me, sugar was just a killer, because when I eat foods that taste good, that have sugar in them, that causes me to want more food. I can eat almost limitless quantities of candy, pretzels, bread, things like that. And there are other food combinations which I've learned, if I'm careful, to, concentrate on certain things. And for me, like a bunless cheeseburger is an ideal food. It hits all the marks for me. It leaves me feeling, and maybe not just one, maybe two, maybe three, but, I eat enough to feel great. And then I don't think about food for, could be 5, 6, 7 hours. If I eat it for dinner, I might not think about food until afternoon the next day. I should mention that when I switched to the low carb diet, I lost 80 pounds, and that was not, I did not lose muscle during that time. I'm sure that I lost water weight, but that was all what I lost in terms of weight, was what I didn't want anymore. I started working out, and by the time I reached my goal weight, I was actually stronger than when I started the diet. And then I just continued on that path. And once I lost 80 pounds, my whole outlook changed. I started running. And this is after the fact, the running. I did not lose weight by running. I started running because I lost 80 pounds. I felt great about myself. And I also realized when you lose 80 pounds, something that you tried to do for 40 years, to be honest, I wasn't overweight by 80 pounds for 40 years, but on and off for 40 years, I struggled with getting to a good body composition. And when that finally happens, after all that struggle, and you start to believe that it's not possible, your outlook changes. You start to say, wait, are there other things that I was limiting myself on that I thought were impossible? And, so that's weightlifting. Even though I'm now 60 years old, I'm lifting weights. I'm stronger than I ever was at any point in my life. I mean, in my early 20s, there was a period when I was about as strong as I am now. But for the last 30 plus years, I was nowhere near as strong as I am now. I ran a marathon in 2023, a full marathon. I've run 2 half marathons. I'm not a super athlete. I got to tell you, I was never a standout athlete in any sport, but I feel like I can do anything now.
Yeah, I suppose that now you're compared to other people at 60, you're probably better than stronger, faster, leaner than almost all of them, right?
Well, I'm not particularly fast. I'm a slow guy, but I can run at a slow speed for a long time. So, I've got some good endurance. Yeah.
That's not everybody who can do a marathon at 60. It's still, I suppose, puts you in a pretty small minority.
Well, that is true, but there's so much to talk about here. I think I met you on Twitter, which then became X, and I've appreciated our dialogue over the last couple of years.
Likewise, it's been fun.
And I got to meet you at the Symposium for Metabolic Health in San Diego a couple of years ago. That was a real pleasure. But on X, I've met so many people who have had experiences similar to mine, or in many cases even more profound. And I know these people are out there, and it starts to make me wonder, like, how much we're losing in our society by these limiting beliefs that we cannot accomplish things, that diet and lifestyle are things that we just simply can't control. And I know there are reasons why we struggle. The food environment is abysmal. It's terrible. And a lot of the deck is stacked against us. But at the same time, there are things that we can do that can make profound effects on our lives. And in my opinion, we have to figure out ways to do that in order to make that possibility.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's an inspiring story, of course, and And like you said, it's like so many other people who could possibly do something similar if they knew how. What's your take on sort of what kind of advice most people get today from experts, from their doctors, or what's your take on that? Do people get the advice that they should be getting or not?
No, I think that people get overall anything ranging from no advice at all to really advice that's a lot of advice is based in certain aspects that have some validity mixed with a bunch of stuff that isn't very helpful, and people don't know how to execute it. Like, for example, it's very common to hear a doctor or nutritionist tell people to eat less and move more, and that's
isn't that good?
well, that's the thing. It's
playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah, well, the moving more part, I would advocate for strongly in terms of health. Absolutely. It's so important to get activity in your life between resistance training, which builds muscle, which is hugely correlated with quality of life and, health span and lifespan. And then, your VO2 max, which is, your basically comes down to your cardiovascular condition and your ability to move for an extended period of time. And then, you've got high intensity interval training. All three of those things provide valuable things. But with respect to weight, I'll go first for my own experience. Exercise causes you to burn off more calories. It causes you to burn more energy. But at the same time, for me, it just makes me more hungry. So if you don't address the diet, you exercise more and then you eat more. Some people, if you work really hard and you use some willpower, you can win that game for a period of time. If you're literally out there for 4 or 5 hours a day, exercising all the time, it's possible to stay ahead of the calories, but it's not a sustainable way to lose weight for the vast majority of people who struggle with obesity or just being overweight.
Yeah. And I mean, we see that in studies too. That is, there is an effect, and certainly it's beneficial. But like they say, you can't outrun a bad diet, at least not forever.
No, and you go to a doctor. At least a lot of times I can only speak for my own experience and what I've talked about with others. But I weighed 270 plus pounds when I walked into a doctor's office, and the most advice that I got was that I should lose weight. That's the advice I got. That was basically a sentence like, you need to address this, Mr. Cornell. And
you need to address this, but no support. I mean, I guess maybe today or in the future, you would be offered one of these GLP-1 medications like Ozempic, right?
Yeah, well, that's probably the case, especially if my insurance could afford it, or maybe they'd offer it either way. But I don't know enough about the GLP-1s. I've talked to some doctors who say they are very effective. I still have my reservations about people who don't need a medication using that medication. So if you've been through all the avenues and your doctor says that that's what's best for you and you trust your doctor, then, go for it. There's got to be cases where that's a medically viable way to go. But to do that instead of some very practical things is a problem in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sad that that's probably the only thing that people will get, and they will still get the advice, just lose weight, just eat less. There is a need, I think, for something more effective and more practical, more helpful. And then, some people may need these medications, but even if they do, it would still be good to have some helpful lifestyle guidance as well. I think the combination will always be the absolutely most powerful thing, right? If you do both.
Yeah, I guess my strong beliefs on this, having seen so many people that have made dramatic life transformations, is that there's probably a path to better health, quality of life for most people. Most people don't know how to do it. And there are board certified obesity medicine doctors out there who are prominent and have big audiences who basically they're continually telling people that weight loss is not sustainable through lifestyle changes alone. And they basically cite their own inability to help people lose weight sustainably through lifestyle changes. They don't know how to do it. They don't have enough time to do it. They say that they have 8 minutes, 10 minutes of a visit, so they can't do it.
That's probably true. You can't do it in 8 minutes, except if you can guide people to something that is helpful, like the doctor who guided you to a book that got you started. If you can guide people to something, then that may be enough.
Sometimes I have a little anger in my voice, although I usually have tried to channel my anger into more positive things. Some of my anger comes from my own experiences, but honestly, I've been very fortunate, even with my struggles with trying to lose weight. I was fortunate enough to not get extremely unhealthy. I think my overall life was more than salvageable. I have a brother who's 50 years old who is a type 2 diabetic. He's on kidney dialysis 3 days a week.
Okay.
He's on a transplant list. He has been for more than 5 years. He's very unhealthy. He's a really nice guy. He deserves better. His quality of life, his ability to get through a week is greatly impacted adversely by his medical condition. And I've seen the advice he's been given with respect to diet. I've been in the hospital when he's been served foods that are beyond baffling to me. Foods.
So like what?
Jello and, things, juice, things that don't help with satiety, that have more sugar than I can fathom. And then the handouts that they give him when he leaves are grains and there's no talk about addressing the hunger issues, the cravings, so it's just an endless cycle of the same old stuff.
I mean, it's very strange that, do you feel like does he look at you and see your health journey and listen to you and try to be inspired by you? Or is it hard to have that sort of effect on your own family? I suppose maybe it is hard.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately for him, is a lot of his medical condition now is not necessarily reversible. I don't know, he's in a tough
failure.
spot. So, and once you're on dialysis 3 times a week, it just changes the whole picture, even with respect to the foods that you eat, because it sort of cleans you out. Like it fixes things.
I mean, it's certainly preferable to turn things around before ending up with kidney failure. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I just wish that there's no easy answer. I don't know what, if he had gotten the information that I had gotten 20 years ago. I mean, for him, diabetes was a long-term thing. But at any rate, the advice that he's gotten is mostly, not around specific diet stuff. They would tell him the same things about diabetes, that you've got to lower your blood sugar without giving any sort of specific advice, your actual A1C. The handouts that he received are just, they're what mainstream medicine gives for type 2 diabetes. It's not really a path towards, they're actually worried about, dropping your blood sugars too low in many cases. And obviously that's a potential problem, if your blood sugars drop too low.
I mean, it's easy to get into conspiracy theories here, but maybe it's not a conspiracy theory to believe that big corporations, they exist to make money to their shareholders, right? That's just the way the system is set up. So you have a system where the food industry, all they want to do is sell more food that costs less to produce. That's pretty much what their world is about. And you have a pharmaceutical industry who wants to maximize profits, which you do by having as many chronically ill people as possible that need medications for life, especially newer and more expensive medications. What's your take on that?
Well, I don't necessarily. I think that money is a driver. The food industry, I don't even get too caught up in the conspiracy. They are trying to make profit.
Honestly, there is no need for any conspiracy. It's just basic financial incentives. This is the way the world works, right? This is what these companies need to do, or their executives will be fired and someone else will be put in there instead. They're stuck in this system. They don't have a choice. It's not about good or evil necessarily, even though that sort of comes into it in a way. But they have to do what they have to do. And then we end up in a system where there is no incentive to make people healthier through lifestyle because everybody loses money there.
Yeah, I don't really disagree, and it doesn't really matter. Like for me, it doesn't really matter whether I discover a conspiracy or not. I've got to deal with my own health and help other people deal with their own individual health. It's like that food that we see in the middle of the warehouse store, like Sam's Club or Costco, or our local supermarket. It's bad. It's filled with sugar. It's got no protein or very little protein, and people buy it by the shopping cart full. It's not going away. It might go away in 30 years, but I'll be 90 years old by then.
But I mean, how would it go away? Like, it's profitable. People want to sell it. As long as people buy it, there will be people to sell it.
I don't think it is going to go away, but it could go away if the government regulated it or whatever. But that's not, that's like cigarettes.
I suppose we'll see now with the new U.S. administration, things might be a bit different, actually. They might be very different, potentially.
I suspect that regardless of what happens with policy and things, that the food will still be there in the center of the supermarket, and that people will still be able to buy it if they want it. And those people that are addicted to it will, or whatever the word is, people that are drawn to that food will continue to eat it, and they will continue to be unhealthy. So we've got to participate in our own journey.
Yeah. So on that note, I know you have your own experience and sort of rules for satiety rules that you are happy to share with people, the ways of thinking and acting that helped you.
Yeah.
You talk a little bit about what those are for you. What are these strategies that have helped you lose 80 pounds and finally keep it off for 6 years, I suppose?
Well, what I did early on, I can't remember exactly how many months into the journey I was, but it wasn't very many. I started thinking about protein and how it played, and I started, I was actually doing a lot of research and reading. Some of my interactions were with Ted Naiman, who I know you work with extensively.
And that's great.
I had the opportunity several years ago to write an article about Ted. He was so kind as to, he was one of the first doctors that sat down with me for an interview. I reached out to him on several occasions. I don't think he had any idea who I was, and he agreed. And it was a great learning experience for me, although that article was after I had pretty much settled my own habits. But back to the rules that I set. Protein, I knew I needed more protein, and I was experimenting with more protein in my day. And I started realizing that if I upped the protein, that it helped reduce hunger and cravings. And I was like, all right, how do I find out how much I need per day? There's got to be like a ballpark number that I should be shooting for. That was just intuitive on my part. And I was probably getting at the time maybe 100 grams of protein per day. And I'm 6'3", and even now at a healthy weight,
it's a good start, but maybe more is better.
Yeah, well, in a way, my what I consider a healthy weight with my current muscle tone is about 205 pounds. So at 205 pounds, I was like, well, should I try to go up to, I heard people talk about a gram of protein per pound. And so that's 200. And that was so much more than I had done. So first I went to like 150 and 175. And, it was like, it's not that hard for me to get that much protein. And I ended up landing on 200 grams of protein per day. And I've pretty much had that as my target for the last 6 years. So that was one of the rules. Another rule that I implemented was to stop eating after 9 p.m. and not eat again until noon the next day. So, that gave me like a 9-hour window, but effectively it was less because I wasn't always eating at noon. So those were my limits. Like, don't eat ever before noon. Don't eat ever after 9 p.m.
Yeah. It's kind of like 6 and 8 or something like that. Like a common way of intermittent fasting.
Yeah, I was doing time restricted eating. That was two of my rules, the 9 p.m. and the 12. And then eliminate most added sugar most refined carbs and most seed oils was a rule. And that did a lot of positive things in my life.
Like what?
Well, getting rid of the refined carbs and sugar, and we can debate about the seed oils. I don't know. I threw them out, and I'm never going back. That basically got rid of almost all the junk food in my life.
There isn't much junk food or ultra processed foods that you can still eat if you exclude all those ingredients. They are kind of like the main ingredients in all ultra processed foods. So yeah, a lot of benefits from doing that, I think.
And there were two other rules. One of them was keep carbs under 90 grams per day. And for me, I tested that just like I did the protein. It's like a heuristic, really. There are some carbs that I don't really worry about, and that would include like green vegetables. I can't eat enough broccoli to make a difference, and I don't think that if I ate a bushel of broccoli that it would cause other problems. I wouldn't feel great. I mean, like who wants to eat like 3 pounds of broccoli?
So
you know,
that's a lot. But it's pretty hard to get to gain weight by eating broccoli. I would say I doubt that anybody has ever gained weight by eating more broccoli.
But here's the thing. With carbs for me, I tested this out over and over with more and less. And basically, for me, if I eat more than 90 grams of carbs per day, I tend to start gaining weight. Now, that's not controlling for everything else. It's just what happens. If I let the carbs creep up over 100, the scale starts going up. If I keep the carbs below 90, I maintain. And if I want to lose weight, all I seem to have to do is dial the carbs down to 50, 40. And part of that might be because I don't seem to have a struggle, particularly with very many fats. I can't sit in a room and eat piles of fat. I could sit in a room and eat baskets of bread, bags of pretzels, packages of Twizzlers. I could do that. I could do that all day long. I don't eat sticks of butter. I enjoy a little butter on certain foods, and I use some butter and olive oil to cook with, but just doesn't happen to be one of my my issues. So for me, it's keeping the carbs under 90. And then the last rule that I had was to simply make a practice of keeping high satiety foods on hand at all times. That covers me for when I'm in a situation where somebody's got cake or pastry on a table. If I have access to foods that provide satiety for me, I don't get tempted by the foods that other people are drawn to. So I used those rules for 5 years. This past May, I decided to do an experiment, and I added a meal replacement shake at 10:30 every morning, and I've done that for over 6 months. It happens to be Health Code, the product that was designed by Ben Bickman. The benefits of the experiment have been very positive, and despite the fact that I added an 800-calorie meal replacement shake during a time when I wasn't previously consuming food, yet I didn't gain weight, makes me think that, this calorie stuff isn't really the thing that we got to be focused on. It's what we're eating. And the particular product that I'm referring to, I could have probably swapped, some other food and possibly had similar results. Like if I had eaten a high protein meal, perhaps the results would have been very similar. But, the fact that I added a meal during a time when I wasn't eating didn't cause me to gain weight. My body doesn't just respond like eat calories, gain weight. It's like what you consume over the course of 24 hours is what's important.
Yeah, of course. I mean, if you eat something that is relatively high in satiety per calorie, it's the way I see it at least, then that's going to be fine because you're just going to eat less of something else later.
Yes, I agree.
But yeah, so protein 200 grams. So for I think a lot of people listening, that sounds like a lot. If people even count how much protein they eat, which I'm sure most people don't. But like most people today might only get something like 60, 80, 90 grams or something per day. So 200, that's more than double for a lot of people. How do you get that high without having to eat a ton of food? Like you have to find foods that are high in protein percentage, right? Otherwise, you would have to eat like 7,000 calories or something. That's not good. So how do you do it?
That the question you just asked is the question I get asked a lot. How do you do it? By people that seem to be struggling to get more protein in. Like I can show you a meal: eggs, beef, chicken, salmon, Greek yogurt, cheese. Even though cheese, it doesn't fall into the same category as some of the other foods because there's a lot of fat in most cheeses, but it still has protein. So I wouldn't turn to cheese as my number one by any means, but you're still getting closer to your protein goal when you have some cheddar cheese. So those foods, I mean, it's like, here's the thing. People see me with my 200-gram goal, and they think they need to adopt a 200-gram of protein goal for themselves. If you struggle to get 200 grams, maybe you don't need 200 grams. Maybe that target is too high for you. What I think people need to understand is if you get 150 grams of protein and you're not hungry for anything else, I think you're winning. If you get to 150 grams and you're still hungry for more food, don't go for the Doritos. Have some more protein, and you need to get energy in your day. I mean, we all need fat and carbohydrates in some combination to provide the basic energy to get through your activities. And my whole outlook on food changed dramatically when I started looking at food as my fuel to do the things that I want to do. And like, I don't ever restrict on the basis of calories. I make sure that I get enough protein and energy to do the activities that I need to do, and vitamins and other nutrients. So you asked about how I get my protein. Eggs are essentially, a large egg is like 6 grams of protein for each egg. So you could eat a lot of eggs.
That's a lot of eggs, yeah.
I do eat a lot of eggs, but not crazy amounts. But if you go out for a burger and you don't order the fries and you don't order the large Coke and you don't eat the rolls, you can eat a few burger patties. If you have a steak and some broccoli and some seasonings on it, you can eat a lot of steak and broccoli and feel really, really good without having, hash browns or mashed potatoes or bread. If you think that mashed potatoes work, and I do eat some potatoes, you've got to find a combination that hits all the marks. And for me, eating foods like that have low protein, like bread and certainly fried foods, a lot of carbs, a lot of seed oils, doesn't work for me. The different foods that I eat is a much smaller list than most people. I eat a lot of beef, a lot of chicken, a lot of seafood. Greek yogurt I have almost every single day. Very high protein.
That's just amazing. That's like a cheat code. If you're looking for getting a lot of protein in a delicious and affordable package and not a lot of sugar or fat, then I don't know if you go for the non-fat version, but if you do, then that's hard to beat from those points of view.
I do happen to eat a good amount of non-fat Greek yogurt, and people ask me about that a lot because people in the low carb community are very adamant sometimes that you should never have anything that has the fat taken out of it. But quite honestly, I get enough fat. There's fat in my meals, beef and cheese. I love cheddar cheese. I don't have a fat deficiency. So sometimes I would rather have just a bigger bowl of non-fat yogurt, which I happen to like the taste of non-fat yogurt.
Yeah.
And put some berries in there.
Yeah, it's pretty great. But I mean, I see it the same way. Then there's more space to add high-fat sauces or whatever. It's no problem with getting enough carbs and fat. I think that's just, you eat delicious foods and you get that. So it's nice to save up on these sort of regular staples like Greek yogurt. If you save up on that, then you have a lot more to spare for other things. That's one way to see it, at least. But yeah, so I would like to chat about, because you're talking about satiety and satiety rules, and that's kind of your thing when I read, or at least what I pick up when I read your X feed, which I think is fantastic. And I think that it's really what a lot of people should focus on. But what I'm thinking is that if people are looking for weight loss and getting stronger and leaner, like you have achieved, then what we really need to look at is satiety per calorie, because arguably you can get satiety, meaning you can feel full and content just by eating ice cream. It's like all you have to do is eat 5,000 calories, like two big boxes of ice cream, and you're pretty full. But that's also 1,000,000 calories or so. So isn't it really about finding foods that are high satiety without excessive calories? So high satiety per calorie. What's your take on it?
Well, I'm very familiar with your Hava app and the satiety per calorie system that you've devised.
Well, it's not just me, but yeah, sure.
Yeah, ultimately, from a mathematical sense, I would say that if you're eating foods that are effective at producing satiety, it aligns with what you're talking about. I mean, satiety per calorie, ultimately, you're trying to achieve satiety without having your body store excess body fat.
Exactly.
And if you are eating foods that provide you with all the nutrients and protein and everything that you need, and then cause you to no longer have hunger or cravings, clearly, at that point, you're not going to be eating. You're going to be snacking less. And at the end of the day, I would imagine that it's pretty much a fact that you will have eaten less calories. So you've achieved a high level of satiety and you've taken in a lower amount of calories. So that means satiety per calorie is higher, which is, what your system is trying to do on a food by food basis by assigning a score. I would basically agree that anybody's goal is to, with satiety, if you have a problem where you're storing too much fat because you're eating too much food, but ultimately you're probably not eating the right foods. I think we agree on that.
Yeah,
It's
100%.
this whole problem is caused by eating foods largely in our system. They have a lot of either carbs or fat or both.
Usually both, right?
And they don't have much protein. There's not a whole lot of foods that are sold as snacks that have all fat and no carbs, but I'm sure there are some. But in the candy aisle, there's a lot of foods that have sugar and no fat. So I don't know. Go ahead and ask me a more specific question. I don't disagree with the concept of trying to be more efficient with your overall satiety, and in the process, you're naturally going to eat less calories.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to find the disagreement, because that's always more interesting in a way. Because I know that we agree about so many things, and I basically agree with all that you've been saying. I think your approach is fantastic. I have no objections, but I would love to find our disagreements. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, there's the only thing I caution about when you're generalizing a value that is, in my opinion, somewhat subjective, like giving a satiety score, as Hava does, for a food, could lead people down a wrong path in certain situations. We haven't really talked in this conversation about what Hava does or what it is, but it gives a satiety score for every food. And my only caution is that people need to consider that their individual results need to be tweaked or adjusted in many cases for many reasons. Like there's certain foods that have a low satiety score, but there be a good reason why eating that food could help with your overall program.
So, like, for example, do you have any examples of that?
Well, I have a few, but what is the satiety score for dark chocolate? Say like 90 chocolate.
Yeah, well, still low. I would say it's in the teens or something. Let's say 16 for argument's sake.
So it's a bad score.
Well, it's a low score. Arguably, it's not a food that fitness people use to get lean and ripped when they're gonna get on stage. It's delicious, and I would give you that. Maybe there is something about really, really dark chocolate that makes a lot of people stop eating it after just a few pieces because it's just so intense in the taste or something. It might be some sensory specific satiety that makes it so that some people, at least, or a lot of people, can just eat a piece or two and then stop. But I would argue that there are other people who can put down a whole package pretty easily, myself included.
But that's actually an example of that, people need to factor in their individual experience. And I wouldn't recommend dark chocolate to everyone, but especially for somebody who feels they need that fix at the end of a meal. If you dial up the number on the chocolate, there is a number which most people can't eat more than one square. And it gets rid of that fix for some people.
Yeah. I mean, I don't object to that at all. And I think that, in our system, if people do that, they can still have a great score for the whole day. If they eat 1 or 2 pieces of very dark chocolate, they can absolutely fit that in and still get a great overall result. So I'm not sure that's a major issue. Like, if people do that, okay, maybe that's great. Maybe someone else who's totally addicted to even dark chocolate, they shouldn't do it because they're just going to finish the whole package and the next thing.
Yeah, I think that personally that different people have different experiences with different foods and different food combinations, different food timings. My caution is just that if you're going to use a system that has assigned numbers, you just have to be careful to take control. Observe your experiences with each of these foods. You will learn something. If you use the Hava app and you haven't tracked food before and you haven't thought consciously about satiety, you will inevitably learn something important and valuable, and you'll probably come out of it much for the better. My strong recommendation would be that you really pay attention to what each of those things is doing in your own body, in your mind, how you're feeling. If Hava says that salmon has, I don't know, what is salmon, like 65 or something like that?
Maybe it's like 70. Yeah, it depends a little bit about on the brand and such.
So if you eat a piece of salmon, say by itself, notice how you feel. And notice, does that piece of salmon with a 65 or 70 satiety score, does that do what you were hoping it does? And if it does, take a note and put that in your system. And then try it again with a piece of salmon and a cup of broccoli, and try it again with a cup of broccoli with a nice sauce on it. Because this is what's important in my mind. There are some meals that, for me, a bunless burger with sharp cheddar cheese and a few of the fixins that don't really contribute to any problem for me, like a little bit of lettuce, some tomato, some onions, pickle, guacamole. You put that on a plate and you can make me very happy. That will leave me feeling a level of satiety that borders on like euphoria at times. I mean, like it's such a good feeling that lasts for a long time. And for me, that meal is worth having in my Rolodex. It's a meal worth going back to because I can predictably know that it is going to solve all of my problems with respect to food. It's going to nourish me, provide me with energy, and leave me feeling satisfied without being overstuffed or uncomfortably full. And that's a win. And you would probably easily learn just what I'm saying by using the Hava app. Because I tell you right now, chicken will not do that for me. I eat chicken all the time for several reasons, but I do not get that same level of satiety if I just keep eating more of it. And I'm not talking about just plain chicken breast, say it's chicken breast and cheese and some sauce and some vegetables and whatever. I cannot get the same level of that euphoric sense of satiety that I just described with the beef and the cheddar. And I'm quite sure it's not just in my head. I think that there's other combinations that get me closer. I mean, but I just think that people need to figure out what works best for them, and especially if you struggle with obesity or food, whatever.
No, sure. I mean, we're all a bit different in our food preferences and how we subjectively experience different foods that we eat. If we're habituated to eating certain foods, maybe even addicted to eating certain foods, that can be very, very different. Like some people may feel like if they have ice cream at home, they're gonna, for sure finish it off the same day. They cannot have it. While someone else might be the same way about, let's say, potato chips. But they could feel extremely different about the other thing. Maybe some people feel like if I have ice cream, I'm going to eat it. But potato chips, I couldn't care less. And someone else could be the opposite. So for sure, there are differences in that sense. And I also think exactly what you said. Some things may work better or worse for feeling really great, and we should all learn about that. But I still think that there is something very fundamentally different between these two groups of foods, if you will, like ice cream or potato chips. These are never going to be very helpful for weight loss, no matter who you are. They're always going to be easier to get addicted to or eat too much of if you compare it to a bunless burger or chicken and vegetables. That I think is a very, very different group of foods for anybody, no matter what preferences they have, because they're higher in protein, they're higher in fiber, they are lower in energy density, and they are far less addictive in nature. So would you agree?
Yeah. There's no question that there's generalizations that you can make and categories of foods that are helpful and for most people and categories that are going to be harmful. So,
because I think that sort of what I'm trying to do is build something, or what we're trying to do is build something that is as helpful and simple as possible for as many people as possible. I mean, N=1 experiments, with all due respect, they will always sort of say a lot less about what's true for groups of people than experiments on groups of people. They are just more reliable, I would argue. So, everybody can experiment with themselves and see what works for them, and they can adapt, and of course, right? But you can't build a different system for every human.
I don't think you need to build a different system for every person. I think I would just encourage people to not rely 100% on anyone's system, but I think that's just common sense. If you take generalized advice, there's a limit to how far you can take that. Certainly you can improve with generalized advice, but if you take generalized advice and then customize it where appropriate, you do even better.
100% agree with that. So maybe the goal should be to start with the best possible generalized advice, and then everybody can tweak it based on their own results and preferences after that, right?
I would think that would be a good plan. And I just wanted to mention the fact that I've been training as a health coach, and I recently got my Primal Health certification from the Primal Health Institute, and I'm on my way to becoming a master coach. And I'm using a lot of this information in my new role as a health coach for Ovadio Heart Health, something that I've been very enthusiastic about for a long time.
That's awesome. Congratulations on wrapping that up, and good luck with your coaching career. I think a lot of people could benefit from learning from you. That's for sure.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Anything else you want to bring up? Anything else you think would be interesting to discuss?
Well, I just continue at age 60. I continue to share my experiences on X with the idea of continuing to progress for as long as I can and help others, learn from others, share experiences. I encourage anybody that's like sitting at home struggling, and I know that the people that will tune into this podcast there'll be some of those people that are hoping to find a way to take that step that will make a difference in their life. Number one, I would encourage everybody to try out the Hava app because of the awareness that it brings to the decisions that you make every day. I think personally, that is something that I've learned so much from. I use the Hava app, I have it on my phone and I put foods into it frequently over the course of a week. It's very easy to customize or to adjust your foods when the photo app takes a picture of your food and whatever. But the process of looking at what you're actually deciding to do, put into your body meal by meal, day by day, is something that you definitely will learn from. I used to do it in a more primitive way by like writing stuff down on a piece of paper. Took a lot of time, but I still learned from it because people don't do that. They reach into the bowl and they take a handful of chips and then they have another handful. At the end of the day, they have no idea how much they've eaten. They have no idea why they keep putting on weight. When you start to examine things on a closer level, you start to draw some observations about why things are happening and what you could do to change them.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I've been doing it now for almost a year every day, and I've done it periodically before as well. But I think that the main difficulty is that it's been so boring, time-consuming, difficult, But, with new AI technology, when you can just take a picture of what you eat and get a reasonable estimate, I mean, of course, you will want to tweak it. But even if you don't, you still get I think, a reasonable estimate, a decent average. You would for sure know a lot more than if you didn't. So for me, I think this could really benefit a lot of people, and the main thing we need for that to become more mainstream and more useful to a lot of people is to make it much faster and simpler to do, and also more interesting and rewarding and fun. So cut it down from like 10 minutes a day to, when our goal is to make it potentially 10 seconds per day for 3 meals. That's our goal, and getting closer to achieving it. What do you think? If it's that simple and fast, would more people do it? I think so.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that should be the goal. I mean, I've been impressed with how easy it is. I mean, if a person, if anybody wants to track their food, the way the Hava app currently is about as fast and efficient as I could really imagine. So if you're still talking about making it faster,
Yeah.
well, good for
Yeah,
you.
much faster, much faster. Yeah, I'm looking forward to showing you what we have coming up, but also what we have coming up, and maybe even before this interview airs, is to get AI feedback on what you're eating. So instant comments on what you're eating, a positive light, right? We're not looking to shame anybody. I think that would just be not helpful at all. But like an encouraging, supportive feedback, what the food contains, how it's going to help you achieve your goals, and what you could do differently next time if you want to reach your goals even faster. So just a few sentences, and then you can, of course, keep chatting with this AI as much as you'd like, but get a few sentences of feedback within seconds of taking a picture of what you're eating. I think that's, I'm looking forward to seeing how people react to that. I think it's going to be super helpful. Maybe not for you because you know so much already, but for people who are just starting out.
Yeah, well, I'm a believer that you observe what you're doing and you change and customize to make it work. And if your system can do that for people, that's going to help a lot of people.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it a lot. Just to wrap things up, now you've been 6 years into this journey.
Coming up on 7 in January.
Congratulations in advance. So what would you wish that you could have told yourself before this journey started? What's the most important learnings that you think you could have benefited from knowing sooner?
The most important thing that I wish I had learned earlier was how much untapped potential we all have, how there's probably a path towards making things better in the vast majority of cases, even when we think the situation is hopeless, and that there are probably people out there that have already overcome the specific challenge that you're dealing with. And it's in your best interest to find some of those people and talk to them and learn from them, figure out what they did. Just because someone else did something and succeeded, it's not a guarantee that it's going to work for you. By no means is that the case. But if you talk to enough people who have overcome similar challenges and dealt with similar experiences, your odds of finding a path go up dramatically. So if you're struggling with satiety, find people that know about satiety. If you're struggling with sugar addiction, talk to someone that's either overcome sugar addiction or has helped people overcome sugar addiction, and just keep working at it. I mean, the same is true if you want to run a marathon. Talk to someone that's an expert. So talk to someone that used to be overweight and has run a marathon. Learn from these people. They're out there, and most of these people, professionals who are helping other people, or people that individuals have overcome problems themselves. Most of these people are willing to help you if you ask. Most people are good people who want to share what they know. So that's my advice for the day.
That's great advice. So if people listen to you and they want to learn more from you and read what you're writing and maybe contact you even, where could they find you?
The easiest places to find me are on X. My handle is Biggest Comeback, so I'm very active there. And then I put out a weekly email called the Biggest Comeback email. That goes out most Sunday mornings, and you can find the subscription link in my bio on X. People correspond with me there. They send me emails. You just respond right back to my email, and I try to answer every email I get. So those are the two ways to connect with me.
Great to know. Thank you so much, Chris, for coming on the show. This was a pleasure.
It was a pleasure being on. Good talking to you, Dr. E.